Hey guys, welcome back. Just gonna do a quick update on Tony's 1929 John Deere GP, and I'm gonna try and do this in one video, one shot. So just a quick update. Real quick, we did get the rear platform access panel off. It's just held in by a series of screws, but then it's also held in by the two studs up here for the seat spring. And I had the same issue I had with the radiator stud, in that the nut stopped up on the stud. I had been soaking these studs for probably a couple weeks now, and the nut itself stopped up on one of the studs and turned the stud out with the nut, and then the bottom one is actually a bolt. But I'm not sure what we're going to do, because if you look at the radiator stud here, this one didn't fare too well. If you guys can see that. The threads, here, let's get it in some light. The threads actually pulled off of the stud and jammed up the nut on the radiator stud. So I ended up cutting the nut off the stud, which is how I found out about the thread damage. Now this one is for the seat spring, and I mean, the threads look like they're in really good shape, but it just stopped dead in its tracks. So what I might try to do is thread the stud back into the case, tighten the nut on the stud to see if we can get it to go the other direction, and if we can, we'll see what the threads look like on the bottom portion, or the outer portion I should say, this portion of the stud. If they look good, I might try running a die at least down to the nut to clean out any of the threads that might have some leftover rust scale in them or what have you. But we'll see what we can do with that. So moving on, we've got the access panel off, the seat spring is off, which is down here on the floor. And then the shift lever is out with the shift fork, which is up here on the case. And this is one of the two broken springs that we found. According to the parts manual, there's only one spring on that shaft, but this one had two springs on it. So I'm not sure if Tony is planning on putting a two-spring setup on this or a single spring setup. That's something we'll have to determine, or Tony will have to determine at a later time. Again, he pretty much did the work on this today without me really helping him much. I've got my daughter, and you know, I kind of focused on her and being out at the playground in the new playhouse that I built for her. So that's kind of what we did this afternoon while Tony was working on this. So I didn't really get any filming at all of what we did today, or what he did today. But really, it was just a matter of taking that panel out, removing the seat spring, pulling the shift lever out, and this shift fork just slides off the shaft. It's keyed to the shift lever. He did put in the new spline shaft for the transmission. So I did kind of give him some advice on that. Basically, what happens is, let me get my flashlight out here. If you guys can see that. So what you want to do is you feed the shaft in from the clutch side, and as you feed it through, you put the gears on the shaft. So you would start with, you know, the furthest, let me think here, the furthest gear that way as you slide it through. And then you would put each gear furthest from the clutch side on sequentially after the closest to the clutch. if that makes sense. So you slide the shaft through once you put your gears on. Then what we did was we slid the tapered roller bearing here on the outside, and we got it started on the shoulder, and I told Tony, well, why don't we just lock up the gears by putting a piece of wood, a block of wood or a piece of steel between the teeth. So we did that, and then we just use a socket on a ratchet and use the castle nut to push the bearing onto the shoulder, and it worked just fine. So it was really no trouble at all. That's how we did that. Now what we are planning on doing, he's got the shift rail in place, but we actually got to slide it back out in order to put the shift forks themselves on, because it's kind of the same order of operations as the spline shaft and sliding gear set. You have to slide the rail in a little ways, put on a shift fork, or actually I would put the shift fork in the actual collar of the gear where the fork rides, and then slide the rail through. Then you come to your next shift fork, put that in the gear set, and then slide the rail the rest of the way through. So we'll have to, I'll try to get that portion on video of installing that rail and shift fork assembly, but that's really all we did today. We didn't have, like I said, I wasn't really involved much. I helped him with the bearing and a little bit with getting the seat spring off, but other than that, I was with my daughter, and we were having fun out in the yard, and we took Tony's John Deere AR for a ride, and if you guys watched the YouTube short on that, it's up, so check it out. It's only, I don't know, 15, 20-second clip, but that tractor is pretty fun to drive, so, and you don't see a lot of ARs, so. Anyhow, trying to think, Tony did clean up a bunch more parts. Just trying to think of anything else that he might have gotten accomplished. I think that's about it though. So spline shaft is in, the gear set's in, seat assembly is off, shift lever and fork is out for replacement springs. We do have a new fan shaft coming, because a new used fan shaft, because when Tony pulled the gear, the bevel gear off the end of the original, it mushroomed the shaft pretty horribly. So unfortunately we had to find a new fan shaft, and there are a few different fan shafts depending on the serial number range you have for your GP. So that is coming from Nebraska. We're waiting on that to get here, but once we get the springs for the shift fork or the shift lever and install the forks, shift lever, put the fan shaft together and the governor assembly on, put the radiator in, mag and carburetor, and it's pretty well ready to run, so hopefully it'll run. I'm sure it will. I know a guy that does a pretty good job rebuilding carburetors and magnetos, so. Anyhow, that's all I've got. Just a quick update. Again, sorry I didn't take much video of this, but it's really pretty self-explanatory. The only thing that we had trouble with was pulling that Timken bearing off the flywheel side of the spline shaft, but once Rudy brought that bearing separator over in a puller, it came right off. So sometimes it helps to have the right tools, and I don't have all the right tools, unfortunately, but I do have some good friends with tools. So anyhow, that's gonna do it. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Stay tuned.